You think you can buy your way out of this?
Watch me. With interest.
The CEO tossed a single worn $100 bill onto the blazing concrete of the private airfield, smiled with absolute confidence, and publicly wagered $10 million that the grease-covered single father standing before her couldn't bring her silent luxury jet back to life. Executives laughed. Pilots shook their heads. Security guards smirked. The little boy clutching his father's hand lowered his eyes in embarrassment. 7 minutes later, the engines erupted with a thunderous roar that echoed across the runway, and every person who had mocked him suddenly fell silent, realizing they had never been looking at a failure. They had been looking at a man whose greatest strength had never been visible on the surface. Before we continue this unforgettable journey, if you believe kindness can change lives, forgiveness is stronger than pride, hope never truly dies, and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment sharing what those values mean to you, share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. The bright summer sun poured across the regional airport outside the city where expensive aircraft rested beside ordinary maintenance hangars that rarely attracted attention. Among the mechanics was a quiet man named Garrett Holden, whose faded coveralls carried years of oil stains that never completely washed away. Most people saw only the dirt on his hands, but those who knew him understood every stain represented another family safely returning home after a repaired engine carried them through the skies. Garrett had once dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer, but life had rewritten those plans when his wife, Clara, lost her battle with a sudden illness only weeks after their son Owen celebrated his 4th birthday. Overnight Garrett became both father and mother, balancing impossible work hours with school lunches, homework, bedtime stories, and endless promises that everything would somehow be all right. Money was always scarce. Some weeks Garrett skipped meals so Owen could join classmates on school field trips. The little apartment they rented overlooked an aging railroad crossing where freight trains rattled past every afternoon, yet Owen believed it was the greatest place in the world because his father always made time to wave at the conductors together. Garrett never complained about the sacrifices. He believed love was measured by what someone quietly gave away rather than what they proudly displayed. That same morning, one of the world's youngest aviation executives, Vivian Mercer, arrived unexpectedly at the airport. She had inherited her father's aircraft manufacturing empire after years of proving herself against people who believed wealth alone had opened every door. Brilliant and determined, Vivian had become famous for demanding excellence from everyone around her. Unfortunately, success had slowly surrounded her with people who feared disappointing her more than they valued honesty. She no longer trusted compliments because they came too easily, and she no longer believed ordinary people possessed extraordinary abilities. Her sleek private jet had developed an electrical failure after landing. Several certified technicians had spent hours diagnosing the problem without success. Every delay threatened a meeting that could secure thousands of manufacturing jobs in struggling communities. Pressure mounted with every passing minute, and frustration clouded everyone's judgment. Garrett was repairing a baggage tractor nearby when Owen excitedly pointed toward the silent jet, fascinated by its enormous wings sparkling beneath the afternoon sunlight. Father and son wandered closer only after Garrett finished his task, never intending to interrupt anyone. One executive noticed the greasy mechanic watching from a respectful distance and jokingly suggested perhaps he should solve the mystery since everyone else had failed. Laughter spread quickly. Vivian looked toward Garrett with tired eyes and saw only another mechanic in worn clothing carrying an old toolbox held together with electrical tape. She assumed he had wandered over out of curiosity. Instead of ignoring the joke, she reached into her purse, removed a crisp $100 bill, and tossed it onto the pavement between them. She announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear that if he wanted easy money, he could keep the $100 for trying, but she was willing to bet $10 million he couldn't start the aircraft within 7 minutes. The crowd erupted with amused whispers. Garrett looked first at the bill, then at Owen, whose cheeks turned red from humiliation. The boy had grown old enough to recognize when adults were laughing at his father. That silent expression hurt Garrett more deeply than any insult ever could. He slowly picked up the $100 bill, folded it carefully, and placed it into Owen's small hand. Garrett then removed his weathered cap, wiped his forehead, and quietly walked toward the aircraft without another glance at the crowd. Those watching mistook his calmness for surrender. Instead, Garrett began studying the jet the way an experienced physician examines a patient before offering a diagnosis. He ignored expensive diagnostic tablets and focused on tiny details. He noticed unusual wear near an access panel, a faint smell of overheated insulation, and subtle marks around a recently replaced connector. Years of repairing everything from crop dusters to emergency helicopters had taught him that machines often whispered their problems long before they completely failed. He asked permission to inspect one compartment, and although several technicians rolled their eyes, Vivian reluctantly nodded, convinced the exercise would simply prove her point. Garrett opened the panel, paused for only a moment, and smiled almost invisibly. Someone had correctly replaced a damaged relay the previous day but accidentally installed a connector pin that had not fully locked into place. Under vibration, the connection separated just enough to interrupt a critical startup sequence. Sophisticated computers had searched endlessly for complicated failures while overlooking one tiny mechanical detail hidden beneath layers of expensive equipment. Garrett carefully reseated the connector, secured the locking tab, checked the surrounding wiring, and stepped back. The stopwatch reached its 7th minute. Everyone held their breath. The engines turned once. Then again. A heartbeat later the jet exploded into life with a powerful roar that rolled across the runway like distant thunder. Silence immediately followed among the spectators. The laughter vanished. Several certified technicians stared at one another in disbelief. Executives who had been smiling only moments earlier looked toward the ground. Owen's face transformed from embarrassment into overwhelming pride as tears filled his eyes. He ran toward his father and wrapped both arms around him with all the strength a child could give. Garrett simply hugged him back. Vivian remained frozen beside the aircraft, listening to the engines she had believed would remain silent for hours. For the first time in years, she realized her greatest mistake had not been underestimating a mechanic's technical skill. She had underestimated a human being. She walked slowly across the concrete until she stood before Garrett. There was no applause. Only quiet. That silence carried more weight than any standing ovation. Vivian asked how he had discovered the problem so quickly. Garrett explained that expensive tools were remarkable, but they should never replace experience, patience, and humility. Machines did not care about titles, wealth, or reputation. They responded only to careful observation and respect. His answer lingered in the warm afternoon air long after he finished speaking. Vivian looked toward Owen, who still held the folded $100 bill. She suddenly understood why Garrett had never argued or defended himself. He had been protecting his son's dignity rather than his own pride. The $10 million wager had begun as arrogance, but honoring it became a matter of integrity. Several lawyers immediately approached, explaining that the wager had been informal and legally unenforceable. They suggested offering Garrett a generous bonus instead. Vivian shook her head. She remembered her father once telling her that character is revealed most clearly when keeping a promise becomes painfully expensive. She instructed her financial team to establish a trust worth $10 million exactly as promised. Garrett could accept it personally or direct it toward any purpose he believed mattered most. The airport fell silent again. Garrett stood motionless, overwhelmed by a number so enormous it barely felt real. After several minutes of thought, he made a decision that surprised everyone. He accepted only enough money to eliminate his debts, secure Owen's education, purchase a modest home, and create a comfortable future for his son. Every remaining dollar would establish scholarships for single parents studying aviation maintenance, engineering, and aircraft technology, ensuring families facing impossible circumstances would receive opportunities he had once lost. The announcement moved even the toughest mechanics to tears. Vivian felt something within herself change. She realized success measured only by profit left people empty. Success measured by lives transformed created a legacy that could outlive every company and every building. Months passed beneath bright blue skies filled with aircraft crossing the horizon. Garrett became director of a new training academy funded by the scholarship program. Students from difficult backgrounds arrived believing their dreams had ended, only to discover someone finally believed in them. Owen loved spending afternoons inside the hangar, proudly introducing everyone to his father, no longer seeing stained coveralls as something embarrassing but as symbols of honest work and unwavering love. Vivian visited often, not as a distant executive but as a partner committed to rebuilding trust within her company. She encouraged leaders to spend time beside mechanics, technicians, cleaners, and apprentices because innovation belonged to everyone, not only those seated in executive offices. One sunny afternoon she quietly returned the original $100 bill to Owen inside a simple frame. Beneath it rested a small engraved plaque that read, "Never measure a person's worth by the clothes they wear. Measure it by the hope they leave behind." That framed bill hung for years inside the academy entrance, reminding every visitor that greatness sometimes arrives wearing worn boots instead of polished shoes. Before this story comes to its close, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe humility, kindness, or perseverance is the greatest strength a person can possess, and share a moment when someone gave you, or someone you know, a second chance. As the golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the runway, Garrett watched another class of students prepare an aircraft for flight while Owen laughed beside them with complete confidence in the future. The engines lifted into the clear daytime sky, carrying more than passengers. They carried proof that dignity can never be bought, compassion is never wasted, and one act of humility can transform countless lives. The greatest victory that day had never been starting a silent jet. It had been restarting hope inside hearts that had forgotten what ordinary people are capable of achieving when they refuse to give up. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Thank you for being part of our community, where every story reminds us that kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives forever.